Welcome everybody who's here in flesh and joining us online. Hi, folks. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda that anybody has? Can we have a motion? Are there any additions or changes to the minutes? Can we have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Is there without objection? Unanimously accept the minutes. Is there any public comment?
I don't know the right time to bring it up, but last meeting, I made a public comment and I'd like to open discussion about that. The same, my comment. So last meeting, I brought up the idea of a new survey to look at what public opinion is of the project, and I just wanted to say I've changed my mind about whether or not I think that's a good idea. Some folks pointed out that they think that's a bad idea, and I agree.
Okay.
And I just wanted to see what the group all thinks. Yeah, I just think that this group needs to have a discussion about that. Does that feel accurate, or do we all feel like we agree that a new survey on the public opinion of the project would be rehashing surveys that we've already done?
Yeah. Any discussion on that? Vicky?
Well, at some point, we need to find out what the public thinks of this project and the design of the project.
Right.
And so how we go about that, we talked about having meetings about that, bringing the public in to hear that. So I think, I guess it would depend on what the context, I mean, you said public opinion of the survey is, but what do we have right now that we can share with them that's, kind of solid,
So maybe my
Mhm.
opinion as a member of the public is like, once we have a firmer plan, right? Once we know whether the block grant is happening, once we have a design based on our survey of the potential prospective buyers, then we're ready to ask the question in a more specific way than has been asked. Does that feel accurate?
That makes complete sense to me, that it's, until we have a plan to put in front of people, we're shooting in the dark and we're asking for opinions about something that we don't quite know what it is yet.
Right.
So when we know what it is, I think that's gonna be I would guess that's the appropriate time.
Awesome. Thank you for the feedback.
And that's most of the questions I'm getting is the unknowns,
Yeah.
we may never know, but the unknowns right now.
Well, I hope so.
I mean, I guess I would just like to point out too, for the record, there is a whole list of public input that we got. I mean, we did have a vote at town meeting, which was only 4 months ago, right?
Yeah.
Where, people 130 to 30 said to go forward with trying to figure out the plan.
Right.
So I feel like it's not that long ago, and we had a Google survey, we had community discussions with input from people. And I think that, we're not at the point yet where we know enough about the final design to be able to
That's the
present
recommendation,
anything, right now.
And just to say that I'm hearing this consensus in light of Eli's comment that says when we have something more concrete to present, we absolutely should present it and
Yeah.
get feedback, but until that point, it seems not that helpful.
No, it'd be
Is that- yeah.
frustrating, I think, to the public. It would be a lot of wasted energy.
Right.
And effort.
Right.
To put something out, to
Mm.
gather it, only to make everybody frustrated.
Well, and we don't want to have like survey fatigue, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are only so many times you can ask somebody the same question before they tell you to go do something else.
Or they don't fill it out.
Yeah, right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on. The second person to represent this committee at the select board meetings. So with Jared's resignation, we had a vacancy in that. Liz is half that. I volunteered to do the other half. I just need to know, Liz, which one did you go to and when do I need to go there next?
Right, so I wasn't at our last meeting, so I didn't go, I haven't been for a little bit. The last time I did go, I was supposed to be there. I think Jared was in the
Okay, so
audience and they didn't call on us. So-
let me change my question. When is the select board next SB meeting and which one of us should
It's
go?
Monday.
Next
It's Monday.
Monday. Yeah.
And do you want to go or shall I go on Monday?
That's an excellent question. I think I don't really care one way or the other. Probably I'll go, just to get it done and out of the way for
Okay,
them.
okay,
And
okay, and it's every other Monday.
Yes.
So if you go this Monday, I will do the next one.
Yes.
Sorry, Donnie, just to interrupt you on that, so that as I understand, the request from the select board would to go one time per month. So that we don't have to go every single time.
Oh,
Cause I had not heard that.
Yeah, that was how understood the email from Francis Rose
Oh,
to
the most
me.
recent one?
Yeah, because they were saying that most of the reports from other committees in town are helpful to have on a monthly basis because 2 times a month is not.
Yeah, I mean,
There's not enough change in.
Exactly, there's not enough that's happened.
yeah, and well, that's
So-
the other thing. A lot of times I go and it's like, I'm just like summarizing the minutes that they already get. So I'm not sure the value.
Well, as I understood it, and just because just being part of the email thread and trying to facilitate this, is that the request was to go one time a month and to send them some bullet points ahead of time. And as I understand it, the bullet points may just be pulling out the highlights, because Kirsty does a really excellent job putting those highlights at the beginning of every one of the meeting minutes.
Right.
But I think to call those out and then be able to speak to them, because sometimes for various members of the select board or for all of us, hearing something and being able to ask a question about it goes a long way towards understanding versus just reading the minutes. So that's.
We just.
No, I mean, versus them just reading the minutes on their own.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that makes more sense. I'm just catching up on that email, but
There-
okay.
let's just be sure of that because we did get a little slap on the wrist. A slight one.
Yeah.
Nevertheless.
But I think so those were a couple of emails earlier today that acknowledging that one time per month. So meaning that if each of you went every other month.
Okay.
Which hopefully feels like not too big of a burden.
Yeah, the
No.
job just got twice as easy.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And it makes more sense.
So if you go in July and I will go in August.
Yeah.
I will go in 4 weeks
Thank you.
later in August.
But that Francis Rose did ask that whoever's going email the Wednesday before.
Yeah.
So that, because they have to warn their meetings, and if they have a couple bullet points to warn, that's helpful for them.
Okay,
That's how I understood that, in the
Okay.
emails from
Yep.
earlier today.
yep,
Excellent.
got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. And
Okay, reports from the work groups, prospective buyers, Eli?
Yeah, so we've gotten a bunch of we've gotten 20, I'll be specific, 25 responses to our survey so far. And let me look, I've got a number of actual bullets to written down somewhere.
It said 37, I think, last week.
Yeah, here it is. Yeah, so 45 original responses to the prospective buyers group. That number went down to 37 when I sent out an email saying like, are you still interested? So 8 people said, no, I'm no longer interested. Of those 37 who still want to be involved or didn't answer, and 6 of us.
Sorry.
So we've got 11 people who haven't responded to the survey. So those are folks that I could either send another email to or start calling if we've got their number. The information that we did gather, right? So now we are in this data processing stage where we can take the info that we got from them about the size of the house they want, the size of the lot they want, and extrapolate a price, an overall cost of their building project. And then we also have their income bracket, and we can compare those two and see if the house that they want to build matches up with the amount of money that they have to build it. then we'll go through a process of like, if they can't spend as much money as they want to spend, what are you willing to give up? Are you, does this break the deal for you? Are you no longer interested in investing in this project? If we narrow this down, if we make it a 2-bedroom or a 600 square foot instead of 800, whatever it is, right? So that will be the next part of this, and then hopefully, and here's Sandy, who's been doing a lot of this data manipulation because she's so good at it. She went through a lot of the same data stuff with the Montpelier housing survey that we did. So then once we have those numbers more massaged into like reality, we will have a better sense of the overall cost of the project, which is important to us, right? Not the relative increase in value of the project, right? So that's one thing we want to get. We also want to start connecting those prospective buyers with with a bank, someone who's with a lender who they might be interested in working with. So, and then they would actually get a maximum like how much they could borrow, and then hopefully we have a plan to set up a housing fair on September 6th, which is Full Home Day. 1 to 4, I sent in a request to rent this space from 12 to 5, so we've got an hour.
It should be free too, because it would be
Okay.
officially, because if we do it through this committee, it would be
Right.
a town sanctioned event.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So yeah, so we could have about a 3-hour window there with some room on either side to have prospective buyers meet with folks, and then there would also be the opportunity just for anybody who wants to build in central Vermont to come and also get a good connection to all of the resources that they've got. So yeah, I think that's most of what I wanted to say. Any questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so how are you determining, you mentioned you're determining the cost for their building. How are you determining what the cost is for them?
Great question. So hopefully we're actually gonna work with the, it seems like Walker has a pretty good sense of construction costs and construction, yeah.
I would not say I am a total expert in that regard. I need some professional backup. I can do
Okay.
numbers from professional backups.
Did you say for buildings or for something else? For the actual
Construction.
homes?
But then also the cost of land, right?
Yeah.
Those are the two things that we're kind of massaging, right? And those are generalizations. Those are only ever gonna be generalizations or estimates until the prospective buyer has picked a prefab home or a construction company, and the thing is built, right?
Okay, how are you? How are you backing into the number of sites to get to the cost of the land?
We don't have a way to do that yet, right? We only have 24 people who've responded.
Right.
So what we're gonna have to do in order to get that estimate is extrapolate from those 24 people, what the proportions of different cost houses are gonna be that go on. So, yeah.
In other words, they're asking the prospective buyers, what size lot are you interested in? What, if you were to build a house, how much could you afford? X to Z, Y to A, that kind of thing. So,
So we have 10, right, we have 10 units for affordable housing kind of already roughly penciled in. And we have 25 more in the prospective buyers group.
yeah.
Yeah,
So we basically have 5 more that would be meeting. if it all works out.
If it all works out, and the numbers that of, the size of lot that those 25 prospective buyers want matches up with the numbers, the amount of available acreage, right? So.
And I would just note that I attended a meeting with the grants committee that's focused on the community development block grant DR money the other day, and they were very happy to hear that we had done this particular survey, because they said that it will be incredibly valuable to have that information when they write the grant, to be able to submit as much information about, income levels, what size lots people wanted, what they thought they could afford, that kind of stuff. So they were encouraged to hear that we had done that, and they definitely will want the results.
And I'm guessing between Sandy and Rick, we can get a range of per square foot cost to build a house, just as a blue sky number to let them, if you want 1,000 square foot house, it's gonna cost you $50,000, whatever.
Yeah, that'd be great.
One of the other frameworks that Sandy wanted to present is the three people that we're gonna present this information to, who are the grant funders, right? The folks that you just mentioned, Lauren, the town voters, right? So that we can give them information on the project, and then the lot buyers themselves.
Another question. Yeah. Has anything surprised you with responses you received thus far, or you were expecting something? It changed up at all?
No, I didn't have any expectation because I don't have experience in this, but Sandy nodded yes.
I can go over that.
Sandy, join in anytime. We're
Yeah.
gonna call on you, but you got something to say, just say it.
Might be more orderly to take in if I add that into what I was gonna.
Sure.
Share.
Awesome.
Sure. Other statements, questions before we move on? That's great report, Eli. Sandy, you're gonna talk to us then about the Montpelier Housing Survey and other things?
I'm sorry I was late.
We're delighted you're
I
here.
was working on the house fair idea. Does anybody have the ability to put up my images? I
this is,
sent them around 3 o'clock.
This is being
Yes.
shared now.
Great, this is it. So,
Can you maximize that screen for us there? The
Great question, Matt.
Zoom screen would be fine, I think.
The box up above.
right,
Yeah, just maximize the Zoom screen, it'll make everything bigger for us.
Oh, yeah,
so in the month of May.
somewhat better.
Yeah,
Let's look.
Let me see if I can do this.
yeah, I was hoping that it would be about the same size as your window. So in the month of May, I ran an unofficial housing survey in Montpelier. And we got 262 respondents, which actually is enough with a population of 8,000 to be accurate within a margin of 6%, which is pretty amazing. And of the 260 people that responded, 145 would like a new home in Montpelier. So I'm gonna just share a couple of the relevant points, and I've shared with the chairs the whole Montpelier report, which you're welcome to look at. Hopefully you will look at it. But just a couple, I wish that we could get more of the Plainfield part on there.
What part would you, because I can move it around, but the
Yeah,
size
maybe
is hard to.
shifting it left so that we could see the Montpelier circles are on the left. I think we need to see both circles just so that they can compare them. Okay, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. Okay, that's all right.
I mean, I can make it smaller, but that's hard to
Yeah,
read,
I think that the labels are less important. All I wanted to show is that I was surprised that the percentages were actually pretty similar,
They are.
which says something very strong about central Vermont as a whole, which is actually your market. If your immediate 40 to 50 people that have expressed interest in lots, if you go through them and you have more lots, it's good to know what your wider market is. And it fascinated me that these are the direct Google analyses of the data. right? So this is the answer for one question, which is your household size. And it's wild that it's so similar, so that, fully 3/4 of people responding were 1 or 2 people. Our household size has severely shrunk in central Vermont. And the other thing that really jumped out is that the majority want to own their home. Now, your survey was skewed because the people that were sent the survey are ones that said they wanted to buy lots. Right? They've never been asked, would you like to rent in the neighborhood? And one outcome of that, if Eli has energy, would be to conduct a separate survey that's directed not just to the East Village expansion, but to all of Plainfield, and ask if you in general want to rent somewhere in the area and you've had trouble finding something. So that might be one thing to do, but it doesn't directly help you, because in other words, if someone's looking for an apartment, they're not going to be specifically only taking an apartment in that development. So, okay, next slide. Then we kind of quickly manipulated the data to show really just counting responses. It was fascinating to us in Montpelier that far more people wanted a detached single-family home, even if it's the size of a yurt, than an urban multifamily home. More people would rather live in a yurt than a high-story multifamily home. There were a healthy number of small multifamily people, both to rent those buildings and to own those buildings. And that actually kind of matched up perfectly between renters and owners. So that was healthy, but by far, most people wanted to own, and hardly any, because in Montpelier, we had the issue of the 4-story buildings. On the lot size desire, that was a lot more spread out. And that was the one surprise I really had in the Plainfield. So we actually looked at 26 answers, which is a little more, it's like 5/8 or 5/8 of your lots. They actually were smaller than I thought. There was only one person that asked for 1/4 of an acre or more. And most people were between a 20th and a 10th of an acre.
In Plainfield,
In the
In Montpelier.
survey that we,
in Montpelier,
no, in the survey
Oh,
for
really?
Plainfield.
in Plainfield.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, and what was really interesting was that the size of the lots was not related to income. So there were high income people that wanted very small lots, and there were some lower income people, let's say more modest income, that wanted really big lots. So there was not a strong correlation. But in general, and I forgot to sum up, I gave Eli a rough draft after I ran through for Plainfield, and I didn't get the total acreage, but it's less. It's far less than what we budgeted. The proportioning of tiny lots, which we call a 20 in an acre, was 1/3 of the total. And that was due to the 2 surveys that went after the workshop. And it's actually much higher than that. And so I found that really wild.
Can I ask you,
Yep.
just clarification, when you said after the workshop, you got the smaller lot survey, what workshop were you talking about?
February 8th, the community design
Way
workshop.
back in the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so this is not, is this?
All of this stuff you're looking for is from up here,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
except those 2 pie charts. So I'm showing you these to tell you that these are very easy for me to generate for Plainfield. And if you want them, just ask. I mean, the data's all there. Your survey sample is a different purpose. I was surveying all of Montpelier to ask in general what's missing. And this is for a specific project and people who've expressed interest. And so you're dealing with personalities, you're dealing with actual people who have to make numbers work. It's a very different situation, but I can generate these. So The other thing was that the house, there were clearly more affordable families in Montpelier than high income, but they, there was a good sweep, a good mix. And then the next, is there a next chart? I think that was it. So, oh, yeah, so then what I did, this was kind of fun. For all of the houses, I took the answers and I translated them to a base house and then a number of bedrooms and a number of small office spaces. And their land size, and if they wanted a garage, and I combined that all together and I got a median house price. The people's desires were more expensive than their budget. So there was and you could, it's interesting that the lines converge at the upper ends, and that's because they're not constricted by their income at the higher ends. So if you go down, it was a relatively easy, and this took me like several 8-hour days to figure out how to get this to be accurate, something I could defend. But I was able to align, in other words, change elements of the house and the land and the garage to match the budget. So in Montpelier, that was an important thing to match them. And so what I want to switch over to Plainfield now, just quickly mention about the chip tiffs. So what it's looking like, and I've sat in on one meeting, they had another one yesterday. The next one is next Wednesday. Is the chip tiffs, it looks like you do not have to fix the exact value of the houses on the land. What you're trying to demonstrate is that you can pay down the bond in 20 years. So if you could pay down the bond by undervaluing the houses, that theoretically is okay. Does that make sense? Because there's no point in collecting so much money that you pay it off in 5 years. Although that may not be bad, right? But it's a little bit more complicated, which I don't need to get to now, but a town has to give a minimum amount. So we're working that out, is what happens if you don't have a developer, so you can't say exactly what the value of the houses are. And I think the short answer is, if your bond's in good shape, vis-a-vis the development that's gonna get triggered from the property, it doesn't matter. Like, you can just undervalue the house part of it. Probably need to know the lot value.
I
But
can
that
jump
would
in there
give,
for a second.
Yeah.
Just the numbers that I'm working with, spreadsheet that I got from you, Sandy. The 13, like between 12 and 13 million for property and land value pencils out with chip. Based
For
on
what,
It does pencil
for
out.
what size chip?
the- for the infrastructure build, plus a little bit to cover our infrastructure build timeline while paying down debt.
You're saying that the spread between real estate sales and the estimated cost of the infrastructure, if that were fully encumbered by chip, that's the improvement in land value that would be needed.
Yeah, and it pencils out based
It
on
does.
the Vermont Economic Progress Council's calculator.
right. I had
Hmm.
done the numbers myself, although I'm not an accountant. I did it with a chip to fund principal of 2.5 million. And it paid down well within the 20-year range.
Yeah,
And so what I tried to do then was walk back the value of the houses so that for the affordable lots, could there possibly be zero house improvement? So if a person just brings in a trailer and lives there until they can afford to build a house, it wouldn't hurt the town of Plainfield. There are a lot of questions to start asking that are like that, but it looks good right now. And we just, as that goes, I'm sitting in on the meetings, and Josh Hannaford, who Lauren connected me with, we're trying to work together
Mhm.
to make sure that towns do not have to have a developer for the houses. So anyway, so all that's to say that is one arena for why we're trying to figure out the house values. And it looks like some of the pressure is off that. And I don't know how the grant will work, but I'm sure they would like to know what the value of the houses are. The most important thing in my mind is starting to work together from the buyer or the individual family and from what Plainfield needs to get out of the land to figure out, do these things work together? And so what we've started doing is taking exactly what they've said and comparing it to what we think their budget is, because we have general information now. Of the 26, there were 10 that were in the, what I call the red zone of not matching. And it was fascinating to me very shortly before this meeting. I tried adjusting the size of the houses just a little, and they all got into what I call the yellow zone, which is at least within 30% margin of what they can afford and what they want. There are programs available to help people with that margin, and we're trying to start figuring that step out now. But so our next steps are to figure out, make sure the chart's correct, and then to start contacting families and ask them if our hypotheses are correct, kind of where they are, and then encourage them to go to a bank. I have asked East Rise, and I want to go to North Country next to ask if they would partner with us and kind of give us help for these families to figure out their pre-approvals. And if I can do that without a person's name, but just having some basic information. So if we can get people before September to have a clearer idea of what their budget is and what that will buy them, the idea is that we would have a fair and they could walk through and actually meet people who make that kind of house. And so the other thing I'm starting to work on is an inquiry to all of the suppliers I can find, builders, consultants, and architects. And this would be trying to pin down precise buildings that are in those budgets, so that people could begin to get an idea of what their money would buy them. It's a big undertaking. No one's done this before, that I'm aware of. But it will be really exciting, I think. And it's going to be very useful outside of Plainfield.
I find it interesting that your number came out at 250, because any real estate agent will tell you that's what everybody says their budget is for a house.
Isn't that
Always.
wild?
That-
It
That's
is.
always the
It's the
budget.
median.
8 out of 10 people will say,
Yep.
I want to spend 250,000 on a house, period.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see that was
Yeah.
the majority.
It
That
is.
was of 145, that was a third of the responses was right in that sweet spot.
Yeah.
It used to be that you could buy one.
Well, right, that was pre-COVID.
So does anyone, that was a lot to share. I was trying to keep it as short as possible.
And I have some follow-up just comments and then questions for you all. So it's important to me as we're going through the data that we recognize that like this is what we're pulling our information from. We're using this chart that the VHFA came up with that like puts each income bracket at a max affordable price. We're using that max affordable price as a reference. That might not actually be the individual's reference for what they're willing. They might be like, I don't want a loan, so I can only spend $50,000, right?
Right.
But they might also be like, I can go to my parents or my aunts and uncles and borrow $200,000 so I can actually afford the thing that I want. So anyway, that's one piece of context. Then the other piece is, does 25, 26 feel like enough? Even if we got the other 10 people to respond, do we want more prospective buyers to fill out the survey? And how do we recruit them? How do we find those people? What do you all think about those questions? And then also, of course, questions for Sandy or comments.
How did you get the responses from Montpelier?
Front Porch Forum, Facebook. I put up posters around town. It was published in the Bridge. I put notices in the city hall, and there was a place to drop off paper. We had 4 homeless people respond, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say I definitely think that we should try to get the remaining 10, or at least, I mean, I know we Paula and I don't know whether you did, but we called some of the people who hadn't responded yet.
That was great.
I had 3 people on my list and 2 of them then filled out the survey. One person I have not been able to reach and there's no contact information for her anymore. But I do think that trying again with those other,
Personal contact is
yeah,
very
it's
effective.
super important. And so I think we should definitely do that, number
Yeah.
one.
I was suggesting that maybe Plainfield put out another announcement. I don't know when the last time was that you put out an announcement that you're taking, reporting interest. There may be fresh people who,
And we can ask all of these questions at that time too.
yep, or as soon as they express interest.
Yeah, we had like on the original prospective buyers list, folks who originally got access to that survey. There was one response that was like, we're parents, we're out of state and we're interested in buying it and building a house for our daughter. And then when I contacted them more recently, they were like, our daughter's situation has changed, so we're no longer interested, right? But like, there's a good mix of people on the list now. How do we broaden it responsibly? That's my question to you all. And then of course, I would also love to like synthesize some of this and bring that to the next meeting.
The other thing that stood out for me was that I think it was 4 people actually wrote in the notes on the survey that they were really grateful that this was being done. They were really excited about the survey.
Montpelier or Plainfield?
Plainfield.
Did that survey have a period of time, that before something would get built, or was it just kind of open-ended? Are you still interested?
Oh, no, it's very open-ended, yeah, there was no commitment. Yeah.
Other,
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, I think this is really interesting. One of the points that I take home from here, I think that's interesting from the Montpelier survey is that putting out a housing survey in Montpelier in a somewhat public way, you have at least 145 people who said they would like to find a new home, which I think, we have some challenges associated or problems that we're trying to solve associated with that project. And one is directly housing people who need housing. But then we also have at the micro level, and the prospective buyer group is very important. And we're working with specific individuals in that circumstance. And that's awesome because these are real people that like we can know and we probably all know and see. And we would appreciate and we like having as part of our community. And then at the more macro level, we have a real estate project that we have to have pencil out. That at the end of the day, all the lots have to sell one way or another, right? Ideally over, not over 1 million years. Hyperbolic. But to just say
You figured that out.
but to say that, okay, in addition to that, here's 145 people or 145 households that live within 20 minutes of here, essentially 25 minutes, who at least in some sort of fashion, we don't know how actively they're looking, but they've gone through enough time and energy to respond to a survey to say they're looking for a new house. And so I think one of the things that I draw from that, and I would just put out there if folks think this is reasonable, is that it's further substantiation of like, is there a market for people who want to buy lots and are looking for new homes? This is another data point that sort of says, in a less abstract way, that this is real. Because I think, we have to consider as a committee, both that micro level of housing people, direct individuals, but also how does the whole thing work overall?
And we haven't settled on the amount of lots.
Yeah, there's a great, but I think, and I do want to say there's some specific questions that I want to bring up for the group to discuss, and when we get to the, one of the later committee reports specifically on it, so. Yeah.
I personally think Sandy's idea of putting it out to the broader community and getting a larger sample size is worth the effort. We can keep the data separated so we know which is which, but I think a larger sample size is way more accurate.
Do you think it's worth waiting to do that until we have the grant writer on board? Because they could help direct the composition of the survey perhaps in a way that would help them with the application.
Well, and did we talk about this at the last meeting though, where it was like, hey, what if we just had that intake form? Like there was this sort of preliminary one, which was just like a simple question, are you interested? And sort of approximately, and then there was the more detailed survey. And and I know this came up last time, so please help me remember. That I thought we had said, well, maybe let's keep that simple one open and even promote it. And then once we need more information, we can go back to that group and reserve it and ask just the people who've signed up since that period of time some more detailed questions. Does that match anybody else's memory?
Yeah,
That's,
I
do
think
like
so.
comment
Yeah.
about knowing what we might need more information on those surveys for the grant when the time comes, and that's key.
Yeah, well, so in that sense, if we ask people like a real simple question, like, are you interested right now? And
we
then
can
if
hold
we,
the more-
and then hold the more detailed questions for later.
I think that's a great idea. I think we should get that out soon and all promote it.
Which I think we have, that's that basic, still that same intake form, right?
It's on the
Yeah, we have a
website.
survey that's just, are you interested? Give us your email.
Yeah,
Okay, then
and
let's
so
just promote
basically,
it.
that sounds like we should maybe promote that, and I mean, I would imagine, and if you feel comfortable, Eli, maybe posting that on Front Porch Forum, and I mean, I think a question is also, do we post that not just on Facebook and Front Porch Forum, do we post it on Front Porch Forum in Montpelier? Do we post it on neighboring towns to try to get that? Cause I mean, gosh, the likelihood that somebody who lives within a 20-minute radius of here might be interested in buying a lot in Plainfield, I would say is pretty high.
Yeah.
I would think.
But the purpose of that is different than what Sandy was talking about, because that's a targeted audience.
Mm-hmm,
I like the data she presented
mm-hmm.
in a larger audience of, I mean, if we can get 100 people from Plainfield to say, hey, we've got 2 people in the house, we'd like to move, or we
Mhm.
wouldn't, or we'd like to find some new rental, or I think that's valuable data to have.
I think we're saying the same thing. I think we're saying if we can get more people on that initial intake, which is like an easy question, who are you and are you interested? Like,
Yeah,
what's
but
your,
you're asking them, do you want to buy a lot in that survey? And that's not what I'm saying.
oh,
In general, are you wanting to move? Are you looking to buy? Are you the general, because Sandy didn't ask them, do you want to buy a house at this place? You're asking them, are you looking to change your location, that kind of thing?
but as the work of this committee in
Yeah.
some ways is specifically focused on this
Right,
parcel of land and this housing project, it does seem to ask the question about specific interest in this land may be more targeted in the long run.
I'm just trying to get a larger sample size to get a feel for maybe the people we aren't.
Well, and John's
targeting.
question is picking up renters. So, I mean.
Because we're talking about or some people are talking about building rental property up there, right?
I mean, I think that's true, but I think if we asked, I would be inclined to specifically ask the question of, are you interested in buying a lot? Because at the end of the day, like it doesn't pick up the renters per se, but in terms of the larger question of how do we make sure all these lots get sold? It responds to that question in a targeted way. And my opinion would be that targeting that group to specifically people who respond positively to that and working with them is more likely to result in closing lot sales later. That would be my argument for that.
The other thing I should point out is I think there were 5 duplexes requests in there. So these were coming from people that would own the building, so we're kind of already generated 5 extra families up there, which is kind of interesting. And I don't know if that affects.
They wanted to build a duplex and rent the other side out.
Yeah.
Potentially, it wasn't specified in the
Is
question,
it-
but
Or,
it could be.
or it would be a condo where
Right,
they own
right,
half the
yeah,
building.
Yeah,
or
it could be
townhouse.
that those 5 people would end up living in whatever, 3 buildings.
2 of them might team up.
Which are just, I mean, I think it'd be nice to have just feedback from the group. I mean, I would advocate for more targeted, or do we want to do something more broad, just so that Eli has clear direction?
So, yeah, and I'd love to follow up on that. So there's a broader like survey of Vermont and finding out what kind of housing people want and what kind of income they have, and this Sandy survey for Plainfield, right? Then there's also like getting people involved in this project specifically. Are they interested in buying a lot? My question when we start saying like, how do we publicize this are you interested in buying a lot, is then we have a list of people and we have to choose who gets to buy a lot. And that feels heavy. We don't have clarity on that yet, right? So I feel hesitant to open that door. I don't know what you all think about that.
My proposal was just to add a couple more questions to your interest survey. Are you interested in buying a lot? Yes or no? I mean, they could say no, but we still get the data from them. What
Yeah.
size is your household? What would you prefer to move into? That kind of thing.
I don't think that makes us somehow contractually obligated to pick and choose there. I think that process needs to be later on, if there's more interest in lots and building than available, then that process needs to be hammered out in a
Right, just because
longer,
they
more
say they want to
ethical
buy a
way.
lot, doesn't mean we have to give them one.
And they also may not qualify for that. I mean, there's gonna be a significant amount of attrition, I'm sure, from the
Oh, yeah.
member, and,
Yeah.
you know, it's like any bill, it's at any buying option, somebody's gonna lose out, and we're not choosing them, they're having to meet the criteria. So I'm not so worried about that. I think the thing that I'm more concerned about is that if we mix in the other question about rentals, that it will be sort of hard, it might be hard to compare apples to apples in terms of the earlier survey and the next survey, but maybe that's just because my brain gets too, you know, but I'm just like, I feel like, you know, we have one consistent set of questions, and that to use that same consistent set. And then the other thing I wonder about is, does not such information about housing desires in Vermont exist already?
Probably.
Does not, like, the Vermont Housing Finance Authority or, you know, some of these other organizations have some just general information? Maybe they don't.
The way they ask question is generating larger houses than seem to be indicated.
Oh, I see. So you're
So-
saying that there is data, but you're not, you
I don't
personally are not satisfied with it.
Right, that's why the state has been really interested in what I've generated from Montpelier, because it's completely contradictory.
And this is Josh in particular who you've.
I haven't shown the thing to Josh.
Oh, you haven't?
Or ACCD,
Oh, I see. Okay,
But-
interesting.
but and the other thing I just really want to be clear about is that because Plainfield is specific families and specific land development on the site, the next step, the survey form that Eli, with Kirsty's help made is really good. It filled my spreadsheet. It just took me a couple hours to generate it for Plainfield rather than 3 days for Montpelier, with a lot fewer assumptions. But the next step really is to be personal with people and figure out if this is looking like their optimal picture, and have them start talking to a bank to try to get pre-approval. I mean, it is a personal process to start getting more specific than the data we have. But to be honest, if you know that for this group's purpose, if you know that what they want fits on 1/10 of an acre, it doesn't really matter exactly how big the house is. The rendering I did, I hope you've seen it, with the 4 tiny houses on tiny lots. The 20th of an acre lot fits houses up to 900 square feet, which is not a tiny house. It's actually bordering on moderate. So, or sorry, moderate to standard. So I hope so that we have to be clear about what our purposes are. If you're trying to figure out how to divide the land up, we don't need to know the exact size of house or whether they're having a garage. It's
So-
just not
So
important.
what I'm hearing is that we want Eli to be very specific in asking questions that talk only about lot sale. Although a lot of the other information is very important to the lot sales, at the end of the day, this committee is focused only on lot sales. And so that's, you know, there's a lot of other housing complexities and there's metadata that's important, but really we want to get to that.
But
And so
people
to
can't
the
answer that
extent that,
question.
to the extent that that's helps clarify it, I guess I would stick on that task.
However, people can't answer the question about how much lot they want.
What it
Without,
costs.
without the details. So it's an iterative process of going back. So how big does your footprint of your house need to be? Do you need a garage? Do you need a studio? How much space do you need for your dog and your garden? Those are all you know, you're down to the square feet with these projects and we're figuring it out. And then if they have budget, they may say, I actually want 1/5 of an acre, I don't want 1/10 of an acre. I have the budget for it. But that, it's a complicated question to get to the law. I guess what I'm trying to say is that after a certain point, whether the footprint is, it doesn't matter, but.
Yeah, but I'd like to simplify what is otherwise a complicated issue for this committee and say that we will gather data as needed, Eli, but for our purposes, we're specifically looking at buyers and doing throughput on them specifically for their finances, not gathering a lot of metadata.
I have a thought
Here's Steve.
question. One of our main goals is to work towards rehousing those that were impacted by the flooding. Do we know how many folks that were impacted were renters that would like to continue renting in some capacity? Do we have information around that? And are we only focusing on rehoming flood impacted folks who are in a position to buy right now or in the near future?
That's a really good question. We don't have information on that, and that's part of my emotional response to opening this up, right? Totally recognize that that's an emotional response from me, but right, Lauren, your comment about how people would be chosen for buying this project, right? Whether or not they qualify is part of what we're trying to address, that
Right.
people who can afford to buy houses can buy houses, and we're trying to get the people who can't afford to buy houses
Right.
into houses when they want to buy houses. So I think that Walker's point that like asking them if they want to buy a lot doesn't commit us to giving them a lot, but we're not gonna just go in the order of people who got there first. And we're not only going to give to the people who can afford to buy those lots, we're going to address how we select who can get onto this land in the future. Does that feel accurate? Okay, great.
I just have one piece of that, and that there's a portion of the lots that will be ushering in folks who are not typically able to purchase a lot, but then the rest of them are for people who can afford to buy a house. So it's not the entire project, it's just a small portion, really. Or whatever,
That's many.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well-
From my perspective.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're obligated for so much, but our biggest obligation is to house people that lost houses. People that have lost houses, they were able to purchase a house at some point. So I'm not the Grinch or anything, but I will say, our biggest obligation is, yes, to provide housing and making a portion of that affordable housing. I 100,000% support that. However, our other major point of obligation is to make sure the town of Plainfield is not left in a precarious position financially. And so those are my two focuses and goals.
Absolutely.
And Vicky also had.
Yeah, and I think that in some ways, maybe the affordability is something that we can address as we go through some of the other conversations we've had about how this is financed.
Yeah,
So I just want to go back to a comment that you made a little earlier, and you talked about these individuals getting pre-approval for their homes, for their loans or whatever. I just want to bring up that it's going to be important that when you're discussing with these financial institutions, that there's a period of time, sometimes from the time you get approval, that approval no longer is valid,
Right.
60 or 90
Yeah.
days. So, and then they have to go through it again.
Right.
And whether there's any hardship and the cost for them to do that, it'd be something
Mm.
just needs to be
Yep.
really be aware of, because
Right.
I've seen this and
Absolutely.
we need to, protect those people.
That's
That's the
right.
way
Absolutely, and a lot of things could change if this project doesn't get built for 2 years, the lot price could change, which would knock out the. So there's a lot, this is like a pinpoint in time. Trying to get a sense if the things work, and then all you're extracting from that is the lot data. And then it has to go on. And if, sadly, if some people drop out of the process, or they find a house in the meantime, I mean, we just have to do our best to.
We can't let perfection get in the way of progress.
And I did want to point out, just, I don't want to forget this, that I think there were 3 people who were in the 30% median, which is they earned between 0 and 30% of AMI, which is considered poverty level.
Right.
It looks like we can make it work for them, which is extremely exciting. VHFA regularly turns away anybody who's less than 60% AMI. If we could figure out a housing project that lets these people buy, we're doing something very cool. And it could be that they end up being renters. That's a possibility too. But again, for this, so it's a super personal process for them to go. They may have never had this possibility of looking at this in their lives before. We have to, I'd like to start working with each of the families so that they feel comfortable making the next step, thinking what it might look like. But again, for this group's purpose, it's turning into a lot. And 2 or 3 years from now, if it's a 1/20th of an acre, it could go to someone of any income range. Right? And you can structure a tip to not have such a, identified lots that are going to.
And they need to start working on their credit score right now as well, if they're gonna be using money in a year to do this. That's
Kim and Lauren?
Sure. Well, talking about people, like, maybe they never imagined that they could own a home, and you're saying, like, have we missed a little bit renters who have been displaced? Do we have a list of renters who were displaced? And I imagine that, we, even between people here, get a pretty good sense of it. And as a finite list, what about contacting them and encouraging them, like, considered home ownership? Do you want to be on this list and to, just pull them into the fold a little bit more, even if it's not a direct match, even if the answer is no? It seems like a good faith effort to do that work. A little bit, I totally agree that there are expirations on pre-approvals. People need to kind of get the ball rolling. Even if things do expire, I think there are people who it's like a black hole to them, like the idea of what are the steps towards home ownership, even if they are aware of that, even if they, then have a contact name and phone number of a lender might be.
And a rough number, what can I?
Yeah, because you start and you just go, I don't know, and encouraging people to get the steps rolling, having that out there. Even if things do expire, even if the dots aren't totally connected, will help people who otherwise will go, wait, what? And it's like the bus will have left the station and they didn't have time to do their homework. They don't have to have everything together, but.
Yeah, I think it's key to have a toolkit.
Yeah.
So that they could go back to something and work through. But getting back just for a minute on the comment about renters, I would encourage for those that may have lost something that are renters to get hold of Goddard. Because they do have rentals that they are doing there right now, and I think that should be a reach out for that. They want to help the community, so.
Lauren?
I just wanted to say, when I was talking about people who qualified, I wasn't talking about necessarily people with higher incomes. I was talking about qualifying according to the specifications of the community development block grant, which is for it's like there's a percentage, like 80% of the people have to have 80% of AMI or something like that. So I'm saying that some people are going to be disqualified maybe from the potential as lower income people to purchase lots.
Got it, thank you.
Or vice versa,
Right.
it could, so I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for spending so much time on this. I'm sorry.
It's important.
No, it's
Right.
Very rich discussions.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Are we ready to move on? Are we clear?
I have a question. Is there an action step around posting that initial survey for anyone?
I would love a loose timeline to process the data and bring it to you all. And then we can decide as a group what to do with it, where to post it publicly. Part of what feels delicate about sharing that information is people's income level, and then like we don't actually know the prices, so making guesses. So I think there's some stuff that feels secure, but making guesses about the prices of lot sizes and sharing that information
I think her
publicly.
question was on
Sorry.
pushing the survey.
Oh,
The
got it.
intake
Thank you.
survey.
Sorry, I missed
Yeah.
that.
Sorry.
I was
That
still-
Kirsty's nodding her head, yeah.
I was still for what Arian suggested, which is further promoting the
Yes,
open
and that's what
survey.
Kirsty was just asking.
Okay,
yeah.
the simple,
Got it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then once you get more responses from that, then doing a more detailed survey perhaps down the road.
And she was asking if there was an action item or something to be assigned. to people.
What I will commit to, building a survey and building like a blurb, whatever that message is, and sharing it with in the communications group. Does that sound good? Who's in the communications group? Awesome, great,
And
Sure.
Kirsten, yeah.
sweet. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
I
thanks for
think
that.
so.
Thanks for that question. Qualifies
Thank
it,
you.
clarifies it. I think we're ready to move along. Lauren, Communication Committee.
Yeah, just an update that, there was I don't know, maybe a 3 or 4 minute segment this morning on.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thanks, Sandy.
On WCAX TV. About the anniversary of the flood, but they also did mention the expansion project. That was on this morning, and, I was interviewed in that, and they also played some old footage from last year in that, as far as I could tell. And then Arian and I were both interviewed by this online publication called Inside Climate News, and actually Nina Sablin, who's on the Zoom, is the reporter who interviewed both of us.
And Eli too, I think.
Yeah.
Right, and Eli, and then, the Boston Globe published an article today, by Paul Heinz, who's a freelancer. And I have a PDF of it, so I can send that around. And then the Washington Post article, we still need to get a PDF of it because it's behind a paywall. And so we need to circulate that, because that was a pretty good article. And then I'm just trying to think, was there somebody else? Yeah, no, I think those were the key ones.
There
right
would be
now.
an NBC Burlington affiliate will be running a larger piece tonight on the
Okay.
flood anniversary that I know I was interviewed for, but I think quite a few other people in town, including perhaps Graham and Michael Billingsley. I don't know if they talked to you as well.
I talked to Sophia Taylor or
The
something.
woman's name was Anna, I want to say Gruber or something
Okay,
like that.
okay.
And they came with a camera
Yeah. well,
and yeah.
The
filmed.
camera crews were staked out at 4:30 this morning. by-
Okay.
Yeah, we were awakened by flashing lights into our bedroom
Oh,
of
God.
camera crews this morning.
That's
Yes.
quite rude.
I thought they were going in, at first I thought it was somebody trying to steal something.
I'm not sure that's the kind of publicity we
You wanna
want.
wake up.
For us, man.
Yeah. Believe me, I was not prepared at the 4:30 this morning to talk to anyone. The only other thing I would mention is that the select board received a letter of concern outlining, I don't know, 3 or 4 different pages of concerns about this project, that came from a group called the Plainfield Responsible Development Group. And I just thought that people should be aware of that. It was not addressed to our committee, it was addressed to the select board.
Is
Will they
it-
share it with us?
Exactly.
Or,
We can send it out.
Should be public record. I mean, if it
I
was presented
guess.
at the.
Well, it wasn't presented, it was
Oh, okay,
emailed.
Okay.
And it said a group of people, but it didn't define whether the group was 2 people
Right.
or 5 people or 20 people. It was not signed except by one person.
I don't think it matters, like, who they are. What matters is the content and what they're saying.
Mhm.
or
honestly,
asking.
or
I do think
asking.
though, if it's a group of citizens, that they should be identified.
Maybe, but I don't really, I wanna know what they're saying, is what I really wanna know. I mean, if I have the names of who they are, that's helpful, because we all know our community, but, honestly, does it matter who says it, if something rings true or false?
Is it the
So
select
Liz,
board
what you're
system?
after is, trying to clarify with FAQs if necessary, some of the things that are being listed on there and that
What's-
sort of thing, trying to make sure that we're.
If
It-
there's
that-
concerns or positive thoughts, it would be nice to know what they are, to hear from the community, that's just another source. So if we
Yeah.
can get some information about that from the select board, that would be really great.
Yes.
I would love it if they filtered that, but yeah, if it is helpful, yeah.
Filter, what do you mean filtered it? Like, don't send it if it's not anything we wanna see.
If it's already addressed in the FAQs, yeah, but I think probably that's gonna unfortunately be our job to filter through stuff that's
Yeah,
not really something we can, one, do anything about, or something we've already answered twice, those sorts of things are hard to.
oh,
Sure.
I'm sure if it's one person, if the group is of me, myself and I,
Mm.
it would still like be interesting, cause you can guarantee that that's not the only voice that has a similar tone. So I think it's helpful to know what exactly is being said, so
Sure.
we understand
Right,
better what is,
what the objections are.
yes.
In radio, we always said only 3% of your listening audience is ever gonna reach out. So,
Right.
I mean, it may
Right.
represent a larger group.
So is there any action that the chairs want to take to go back to the select board? and
ask them to-
about that?
Sure, I can dig this out of my email and forward it to folks. I'm
Yeah.
happy to do that.
There you go.
Or maybe ask the select board if
Yeah,
they,
nice sense. It's like if you send an email to one person, even if it's about someone else, it's like, well, you sent it to them. But you could prompt them, like, hey, we think the ball is in your court. What's next? They very well may say, well, publish this or spread it around, or,
Mm.
but. They're bored, they have different, they're not one person, so it will be. The elected body deciding what to do with what they
they
receive.
received, yeah.
And then,
Does
we don't have to.
I feel like it's really.
that not fall under open meeting if you send it to all of us at the same time?
Oh, that's a great question.
Oh,
I don't know the answer to that.
I
That's-
think it
that's a-
does.
I don't think it's.
We're not conducting business, it's just a point of
Right.
information about
I
that.
don't know.
Well, realistically, isn't this gonna go to the communications group anyway if it does come to try and filter and decide what to do with it?
Or-
Well, it
and
wasn't
fax.
addressed to us,
Yeah.
so I didn't
Yeah,
respond to it,
right.
you know.
Right.
So maybe somebody should go back to the select board and just say, is there any action you would like our committee to take on
Yeah.
whatever you received, and get guidance from them as to what they want to do with it?
So am I hearing that we don't
You
want
asked
to?
that.
I want to know.
Yeah.
We want to know, but it's what they want to
I
share.
said, the response was,
Yes,
Francis said no.
Oh, he did,
I I have a quick thought. It would be great for us all to read it, and with the idea of should this be something that we share or not. To me, if we have spoken about it publicly, it feels weird to not share it publicly. To me, it feels like there's something to hide and there's not.
Yeah,
I
the
agree.
only question is whether we can send this out, whether we're violating the open meeting laws by sending it out. There's no question that it's public and it should be shared.
Okay.
My only question was, is a group email counter to the open meeting laws? I'm not 100% sure the answer to that, but that's the only caveat.
Gotcha. Thank you.
If we were making decisions, obviously that.
Or
would fall under-
comment.
Okay, so for information purposes, otherwise the police can come get us.
Get the permission.
yeah, exactly.
I think, because we could make it an agenda item and have it as a piece of the documentation as part of that meeting, and we can get it, review it prior, and then we could discuss it, if we wanted to be like super duper careful.
I'll dig it. It's in my email somewhere. I'll find it. I'll dig it out. I'll send it to the entire committee and say this is informational only.
Yeah.
Or
Thank you.
some disclaimatory statement like that,
And
so
then-
I can claim innocence.
And then
Please
maybe
do
we
not
can
comment
discuss it.
or.
Wait, what did Walter say?
Andy Walker.
Walker, what time?
Then maybe we can just discuss it next meeting.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion on the communication committee at this point? Well, we'll move on to budget and finance. I'm gonna throw that to you, Arian.
Okay, great. I want to just give a couple of quick updates. And the third point I should have a discussion. So one is the update on $150,000 loan from the Vermont Community Foundation. As I understand it, the loan document has been reviewed by the town attorney, then re-reviewed by the Community Foundation's attorney, and everybody says it looks okay, and that the select board may take action on that as soon as next Monday. And that the plan would be to release those funds to the town so that we can move forward with some things. Obviously, the engineering portion of that, we're not ready to quite reissue that RFP, but there are some things like the archaeology survey, which UVM, as we've discussed previously, has a very short window in which they do those, and we want to get that done sooner rather than later, so it's not next year.
And remember, you need to clear that through Bram before it's done.
Yes, so that has been mentioned to Bram. My understanding is that it is also so there are two things that are relevant to that. One is that Bram is planning on mowing those fields sometime after the 15th of this month.
He's been telling me that for 3 years.
Well, I'm just reporting what I've heard, and that there was a question about that, and George and Rose Paul were consulted about bird nesting, and they said after the 15th of July is considered the okay date with regards to that. So my understanding is sometime after the 15th, the fields will be mowed. There is going to be a portion of the land right along East Hill that has to be plowed and harrowed for the archaeological survey, and that I think it'll be, and that I'm hoping that can happen by the end of this month, so that can get reviewed sooner rather than later. So I asked a couple people with tractors who could come and do that to try to get some town volunteerism to save some cost on that, but I don't have a firm commitment yet, but I that's on my action item to try to get that.
Isn't that all wetlands though?
It has to be the area that is adjoining the road that is not delineated wetland. It's like, it's such a weird thing, and the wetland portion of it, they still review it, but you can't plow it, so, you know, it's like, it's like there's a 10-foot wide strip. I mean, essentially, there is a map of what has to be done, and hopefully it's clear enough from, you know, we're gonna do the best we can. It's like most things in life. But just, I can't comment on when the mowing's getting done, but I know the plowing, the goal is to have that done before the end of this month. Sorry,
I wanna go back to
The loan?
50K loan, yeah.
yes, go,
Is there anywhere documented as to what the 150K is potentially going to go?
so I can read you the language. If I can just pull it up here for a second.
Is that public record yet?
I believe that it will be when, at the next select board meeting, you know, I mean, I don't think, at the end of the day, this will be an execute, you know, as I understand the intention, this is an executed document that becomes part of the public select board record along with the bazillion other documents. But essentially, the language will be for engineering and quote, permitting related expenses to further the project, to produce final documents.
And is there, do you know, this percentage, is it like a 2% interest on it?
It's at a 2% interest rate, yeah.
And if I could jump in here, just on the chip financing side, I'm putting in 205,000, not 150, but just to cushion it a bit. Basically, the chip law allows you to like kind of back finance your expenses on a project. So I'm adding that this loan as part of the
Mm.
chip financing
That makes sense.
project, so it'd be paid back from that eventually back into the town.
That sounds good. Next item, so for the community development block grant disaster recovery, there, as I understand, they published their rule that still has to be approved by HUD. Everything at the federal government seems to take more time these days, as we're all familiar with. The application helped from the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board that has moved forward and was approved, meaning that they will pay for a grant writer to help the town write this grant. And Lauren and I have been working with Karen Hatcher and Pat Moulton from the state. Everybody I think knows who both those people are. To move that forward. They gave us one candidate grant writer, and I believe we may get a second, and then we get to choose. And so that is moving forward. The deadline for that grant is as yet not released, but we continue to move forward in that direction. And that is kind of the latest on that. It's still anticipated that the grant application will be due sometime in probably September or October. Does that sound right, Lauren?
I wrote down from the last meeting that it would be July 22nd before HUD comes back with comments. They had a 45-day window.
Okay,
And that
great.
August, the application or the pre-app would be open.
My understanding from Karen and Pat was that the pre-application is a thing to help you get your documents in order, but not a
It's not
formal,
actually.
it's not a formal requirement.
Oh, I see, okay.
That's how I understand it.
Okay, we did look at that pre-application too, so we've started to fill that out.
Yes.
In terms of what is required, it's kind of a list.
But
of
it's, I
things.
again, I think my understanding is it's a helpful step,
I
but it's
see.
not like a mandate, we must have it.
I see, I didn't get that, okay.
So that's kind of the latest on that. So any other questions on that application in that grant? The third item is so I'm gonna just show something that we've talked about before, but this is this is just to come at like a little bit more of to talk explicitly of a macro strategy as we're looking at how we finance this project. So it's very just putting this in text. And I'm sorry, it's like pasted from another email here, but so we talked about having this from a budgeting standpoint. Let's see if it's not that big. Let's see if this. Okay, so we have. Can folks read that, or is it too small?
I can't read it.
Let me do something here.
I'm probably forward to read it.
I know.
I'm looking at Arian's screen. and
Yeah,
can't see it.
how's that? Is that better? Bigger? Bigger?
How about you read it to us?
Okay, well, so what we have to, in order to. The range of funding scenarios here is we sort of have full grant funding, right? Which means that we have this, the project gets all the funding it's needed from the community development block grant and or other grants, and all land sale proceeds go into a revolving loan fund. The scenario budget is currently set at approximately $5 million. So, right, so this is everything gets knocked out of the park with grant funding and it pays for the whole thing. And at the far other extreme of possibilities is a no grant funding scenario. Meaning we apply for all the grants, we get 0 of them. And so from a construction of how does the project work, these are kind of like the two extremes that we're operating within. And under this scenario, the project budget tries to get limited to approximately $4 million. Cutting corners everywhere that we can, with $3 million raised from land sales and the balance raised by new CHIP programs. It's possible we can get some more money from CHIP. That's still being nailed down. But again, from a conceptual standpoint, at least to me, and I think others in this committee are in our work group, these are our kind of polar extremes of actually going somewhere, right? There are other scenarios that lead to no project, right? But these are our extremes of how does this project actually get done, somewhere between these. And like many things in life, it's probably gonna be somewhere between these two, right? It's probably, you know, I'll be the first to open the champagne bottle if all the grant money comes through and everything's paid for. But we've also been told by Pat Moulton and others that this came up actually recently in a conversation that when people submit community development block grants, the average funding amount of those block grants is not 100%. It's much more like 80%. So it's much more like you ask for $5 million and you get 4. 4 would still be amazing, right? But to say that, that we're probably looking at somewhere between. So if we plan from a financial standpoint, if we do some planning that says, we're gonna plan that we're gonna plan for these two extremes. We're gonna work it like how is this gonna work if 100% of the grant money comes through? And how is this gonna work if none of the grant money comes through? And if we have a viable scenario between both those extremes and we end up somewhere in the middle, we then have a viable scenario. So it's good to conceptualize what our polar extremes are. Does that make sense logically? Okay, so the next, simultaneously with that, we have to have one engineering plan. We have these polar extremes, but if we move forward with engineering, we have to have one plan because we don't want to we can have a plan that maybe, builds out something a certain way and how can I explain this? We may have an engineering plan that says there's going to be 50 lots, but we only end up building 40 of them. You could say that the infrastructure is designed for this, but they never actually get built. Like that is a viable strategy. But we can't tell them, well, we're gonna have 2 scenarios with totally different roads and totally different water and sewer. Like we can't afford to run the engineering for that. So if the recommendation from our work group is to say, since we have the Vermont Community Foundation loan and we can only engineer one plan, and we may or may not get all this grant funding, we have to hedge our planning to accommodate a no grant funding model. Which means in this case, the generating something like $3 million worth of revenue, and I'll explain how we get to that number, is probably the most we're going to get up there while trying to meet our early on. We had some conversations about affordability and having some lots cost in the range of $30,000, and those would be smaller lots. And early on in some of the budgetary modeling with Sandy, because we had to come up with some average pricing across lots, some people have heard this number before, where if we say the average value of land sales is $300,000 an acre, meaning that on average, if you bought a fifth of an acre, that would be $60,000. If you bought a tenth of an acre, that would be $30,000. That does not mean that the final price of those lots are going to be that, but it means from a rough number standpoint, the goal is to approximately sell lots at $300,000 an acre on average. Sounds like a lot of money, but it also is like, if you have a $30,000 in-town lot with all services provided, that also sounds like a pretty good deal, right? So it kind of depends on which perspective you come at it
I think
from.
we just sold a lot, for 40,000, that was very small in town lot, but.
And so that,
And that was
Yeah.
considered inexpensive.
and so, it's all, $300,000 an acre sounds crazy if you're buying acres. $30,000 for an in-town lot sounds totally reasonable if you're buying lots. So what that means is, though, and this is where the really important part is if we go for that $300,000 revenue goal, it means that we need to have 10 acres of sellable land that we are selling. And so if we have that as a target for our designs, and that, again, that 10 acres does not count road surfaces because we don't sell road surfaces. So somewhere around 1.5 to 2 acres of area is gonna be road surfaces. In order to generate that $3 million number, with 10 acres, what that means is that looking at the land generally, and this was part of the exercise, a little bit part of, I think, factored into some of the designs that Rick and that group did, is to say, some of these public open lands and some of these wetlands, we have to push as much as we can on that to try to get that 10 acres. Does that mean we'll be totally successful? No, but part of the goal of this is to put some design criteria out there based on the budgetary constructions of this project, so that we can say, we can develop some more concrete parameters about what really will work. And so extrapolating along these steps of, here's our parameters of possible budget scenarios. If we need to hedge towards a no grant funding standpoint, and we value the average of the average lot sales price is equivalent to $300,000 per acre, and we need 10 buildable acres, our plans that we go to, not the final designs, but when we start to do conceptual drawings that we're looking at in this committee, when we are having conversations with folks at the wetlands and other things, we need to be thinking within that framework. Does it mean definitive to the hard line, we need exactly 10 acres or the project is no or no go? No, that does not mean that. But it means when we are starting to get real articulate and concrete about what is going to make this project probably work, it means the current design has just a little bit, the current design, as in the last design that Sandy had drawn, had a little over 8 acres of sellable lot area. There's a difference between 8 and 10, and we need to be shooting for 10.
Does that, you said sellable lot area, was that buildable lot area? Or
No.
Sellable, okay.
Sellable lot area, because, and that's an important distinction, because there are some lots, as has been drawn, that they got a lot of hillside. Maybe they have some, maybe they even do have a little bit of wetland, but we need to be able to sell them at that price on average. And I would argue that some of those lots that are up on the hill that may not have a ton of buildable area, but you're gonna have a view of the river when you're done, like, that's worth some real money. So I think selling those at a higher price point is ultimately, again, it's gonna help us get to that average sale of $300,000 an acre.
I mean, I
can
hear all of that, Aaron, and it makes, you know, you have to plan for the worst case scenario, and I agree. What worries me when I am listening and thinking about this, it's like, we'll have to sell every piece of sellable land, and I worry we won't.
Well, I think addressing that as acknowledging that as a valid concern, we still have to develop some conceptual parameters as a group in order to move forward. Yeah.
300%,
Yeah.
I can't let that go without me saying it.
And
out
I would
loud.
say, keep saying it, you
Yeah.
know, because we all want, I think all of us sincerely want to see a plan that we feel good about and that will work. And I think the goal of my conversation here is try to get a consensus and even like a, you know, hey, I don't know how formally you need to vote, but I was chatting with Rick, and Rick's like, in order to develop a drawing, we need agreed upon parameters.
Yes.
And one of those parameters that we need to agree on is, how much buildable area are we looking for?
Yes.
And when you take all these other budgetary considerations, it's like 10 acres is kind of the number that makes sense to me. And I'm trying to explain why that number makes sense, given all of the other parameters that we've discussed. And I think that's a good number to shoot for. Does that mean that we'll end up there? No, but we have to have some parameters to draw for.
Can I
Designed
ask
I
a
sort
question?
of,
Maybe Rick, if Rick could
yeah,
go.
is that okay, Walker?
No
um,
problem.
After our test exercise, John and Liz, I felt like, gosh, okay, so we did this, but what does it mean? And how many of these do we have to do in order to figure out what's viable? So in the meantime, I said to Arian, we need some sort of financial parameter that's sort of top down that would at least allow us to begin to test at a reasonable level so we can see what it is and what it looks like, because otherwise we're just sort of maximizing. Yeah. And so,
Exercise. It was part of the exercise.
well, we pushed it as far as we felt we could.
Yeah.
And I got some snappy feedback from some community members, but you know, I think that this would help our group, in my opinion, say, okay, this is something that we could aim at and then test that again.
Yeah.
Remind me, what did we have for buildable acreage at the end of that?
I don't know.
I don't remember either.
And you know, John, you and I went around a little bit on it because we were trying to figure out, whether it was the whole buildable area,
Yeah.
whether it was the whole saleable area, and I was including roads and common space. And Arian brings up the point that, no, that's not
No, it's not.
saleable,
It's
and so that
yeah.
changes the whole
Yeah.
top-down finances, and so.
Right.
That, I
Yeah.
don't know the answer to that. We,
We can
we
look
really
into
didn't
it.
get in that much detail.
I think I'm excited to dig back into this with that
With
parameter.
parameters.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna, so Rick and I have been in touch with Pat Moulton, who has been facilitating a conversation with the wetlands folks. And, we gotta start that conversation back up, and we gotta know clearly what we're asking for.
Yeah,
And so that's why I think it's important that we as a group, acknowledging that it's not the final design, but I would ask that we say, okay, this 10, here's our goal. We're gonna be in a funding scenario between these two for a project to work. And in order to hedge towards less grant funding, we need to be targeting this 10 acres of sellable lots.
That's some comments.
I
Yeah.
need to interject for just. a
Oh,
Oh,
second.
but hold on, Walker
I think
was
Walker
before.
has been trying for a long time, then Vicky.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've run a lot of different scenario calculations on all of this. The main, goal that we have is to be able to put the infrastructure in and have all the legal costs and everything tied up and paid for to divide the land and sell it. I think we're not accounting for the CHIP Act. And I think what we need is some information around what is going to be acceptable to the town and what is going to be acceptable to those people who are going to approve a CHIP application. So we need to have those conversations, and that ties into the grand list. That ties into the grand list stabilization act that was also just passed, because the town is getting money for the houses that are bought out, so I think we need to factor that in. I think that the worst case scenario is not as bad as we might have been calculating.
I would agree with you, Walker. I think one thing that's important to say, though, is that with the CHIP Act, we have a lot of hypothetical scenarios about home value that we have to kind of put out there, and a lot of further steps. And so because we need to pick a parameter to basically allow it, we have to sort of put a dart on the board to enable us to move forward. That my recommendation to this committee is that we put that dart at 10 buildable acres for $3 million worth of revenue, because do I think ultimately we may be able to generate some, if we come up short from, we're gonna have to use some CHIP under a no grants funding scenario. We are gonna have to dig into that CHIP Act.
I guess what I'm saying is, in a very conservative situation with an average lot plus house total value of 300 per lot, 300K, which is like way below the median house value in Vermont.
Can you speak up, Walker? We can't hear you down here.
So if we're calculating at 300,000 value, land plus house, and we're taking out the original value of the land, that's a really conservative number, and maybe it needs to be, maybe some real estate agents and some builders need to look at it and say, yes, that's conservative. I'd rather play a conservative number with the current plan and see if it pencils out with CHIP, because it seems like a very practical, kind of no nonsense, sort of provable thing to be able to say, this is going to be the average total property value, that you can dig into. And if it's 300K, which seems conservative to me, that works out for the entire infrastructure with the current green space and the current plan with CHIP.
So you're saying, Walker, that we can include, in our test, we can include the roads and the green space in the 10 acres.
Exactly.
I think that might be a finer point that what we'll try and do as a group is just test this again and see what we come up with and see whether we're at what you're suggesting, 10 acres, gross or 10 acres net, which is what Arian's saying, just see where we end up. I have no idea what it's gonna come out to, so that'd be valuable information.
Right, because using wetlands is gonna cost us money.
Using wetlands is gonna cost us money, right?
And it just is it seems like an extra complicated thing that if we can get preliminary, some preliminary information about what's possible with CHIP, what the average actual value of these houses will be, and some feedback from the select board or the powers that be around, applying for and using a CHIP. If some of that stuff is in place, then I feel secure in saying, with a very conservative estimate, that we'd be able to run a CHIP for the full infrastructure cost, plus the additional loan cost before we were at full build out. And that's a 2-year build out of infrastructure and a 4-year build out of houses. And at $12 million total property value. So I don't know if it's necessarily worth it to go into a worst case scenario 10-acre design right now. And if we can get a little bit of feedback on whether that conservative estimate is real.
I think I think it would be worth going through some of the parameters. I mean, there's some certain amount of I have a little bit of hesitation about putting, just on a personal level, putting forward a recommendation to fund the project entirely with CHIP money. Because one of our mandates is restoring tax base. And so if we borrow all of it, I don't think we're putting forward the best proposal that I think we can put forward. That's my personal opinion.
I mean,
I
I
agree
agree.
with that
And part of this CHIP though is being paid back by the lot sales. It's
Right,
mainly
yeah,
about.
the direct sale of the land would pay back a lot of that right away.
Right.
Christie's
And
had her
then
hand
any
up for
grants.
Christie's had her hand up for a very long time.
Okay, sorry.
It's a brief comment, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot since our last meeting. The use of more wetlands is concerning to me, and it doesn't have to be a big conversation. I just want to note it because I think the federal government is removing protections for a lot of important lands right now, and it feels morally icky to kind of capitalize on that. I know that we're in a tough spot, but I just wanted to put it out there since it's been on my mind.
Kirsty, I've been thinking about that too and trying to figure out what we should do about that. One thing that's been done in the past, and we really haven't addressed this in our group, is Nico Rubin did a wetlands improvement map. And so maybe what we could do is actually, and I wanted to talk with some folks about this and see what traction this could take and whether it has, permitting and ethical traction or not, but to actually try and improve what's there. If we're reducing it. So if we're taking away, we're making what's there even better. And I don't think it's a real strongly functioning wetland. And so that's kind of where I am on it right now, but
And
more later.
I think just on that, I totally agree with Rick's point. And I know one of the things that early on, the folks at A&R were receptive to that idea, and Nico did a preliminary drawing. And I think we can, in a very real way, have the same ecosystem functioning or possibly better by improving some of the stuff that's there. Even, not just our own wetland delineator that we hired, but even some people at A&R have said, well, this is not exactly a high functioning wetland as a 200-year historical hayfield. That said, there was receptivity at A&R in terms of making wetlands improvements in exchange for that process. And some folks may recall that then the federal agents, Army Corps of Engineers sort of that was where the direction was going with the state, and they were receptive to that. The Army Corps of Engineers said that they didn't like that idea. The Army Corps of Engineers has revised is in current rulemaking and has already issued a guidance that essentially says this is no longer jurisdictional for them. So that allows us to revisit with the state that original plan, because there may be it's very conceivable that we kind of can have our cake and eat it too in this circumstance where we're able to improve the wetland functioning as a whole while also getting a few more square feet to actually have some real estate with. That's the hope. Are we necessarily going to get there? But we'll have to find out. But that's there. I think we all share some of those concerns, especially in light of, flooding.
Yeah, and the flooding issue has been brought up to Arian and I, and just a concern that we don't want to make the flooding situation downstream in the village worse. And so that's another. There are lots of different viewpoints on this whole wetland issue, and a lot of them don't necessarily diverge. I think we can come up with a converging solution potentially.
And on a selfish level, that allows us to move the road further away from my house.
Well, so just to bring the conversation, back to close on this. I mean, I would like it if we could have a sort of formal endorsement, at least at this time, of the committee. And Walker, if hopefully you can be comfortable with this too, acknowledging that the CHIP program really exists. We also have to acknowledge that we're still in rulemaking of CHIP and how CHIP totally pencils out. And there are some decisions that we kind of need to, if we're going to have a shovel-ready project to talk about for this community development block grant that has been very explicitly, the further along we are, the higher we're going to score. We do kind of need to set some parameters down that we can build on and continue to move forward. And so all of those things lead me back to the same thing. I think we should have some agreement that for those desired parameters, let's start targeting 10 acres of sellable land. Maybe we don't totally get there, but we have to put some sort of markers down that allow us to push the design forward.
Got a few comments.
Yeah.
Do you want us to to take a formal vote, or should we?
I think Vicky had a comment. Yeah. Sorry.
This one, I hope it won't take too long, but when I look at this and I see the full grant funding, and you look at that particular grant, the VR grant, and not the town not having to pay anything back, hopefully, or others, is the assumption or others that the town wouldn't have to pay anything back. My concern is, the CHIP money, we know that they're gonna take some of that tax assessment for like 20 years to pay it back. And the town's gonna be responsible for it. It's gonna have that debt that's responsible for. The CHIP rules aren't gonna be defined until October. And I'm just really kind of uncomfortable, to be honest, right now, because I don't know what these costs are. The actual grant itself, Vermont went to HUD, they're waiting for their response to come back. That hopefully will be in a couple of weeks, because it was June 5th or 6th that it got submitted. So we don't even know where Vermont stands, not even to say how Plainfield's gonna fall into this. So I'm thinking, this is nice, but to me, there's all these unknowns. And to design something and say, 10 acres and we got the wetlands, it's still a question mark, and we hope the state's gonna be better than the Fed to work with. I just talked to an environmentalist the other day, so that the state's worse to work with than the federal government on wetlands. So I have all these questions in my mind, whether this is kind of like, premature. And that's why I'm bringing it up, because I think there's a lot of questions outstanding. And not only that, but the town just got hit with their tax assessment. We don't know what the municipal rate is. It's supposed to be set in July. And I have concerns about the people in this town and their taxes and their tax rate. And here we're throwing this up saying, okay, we're gonna get the CHIP money we're hoping for, and I'm having problems with that, I'm sorry.
Vicky, I think one thing that I often struggle with and I'm a very general thinker, so the details sort of mess me up. But one thing I'm having trouble with is, aggregating all these details, but I do think it's important to keep trying to whittle away at the edges of it and try and gather those things in a general way. And when my turn's up, I'm gonna explain what I'm attempting to do about it, but I think we should keep working along. That doesn't mean that any of this is gonna pencil out, but it does give our group a direction to move in so that we can have something to comment on and see whether it works or not. And for me, that's really helpful.
It's a few hours worth of work, I mean,
Yeah.
For me, if it's, can we look at using 10 acres, versus whatever it was, 7 or whatever, that's one thing. If there's a cost to the town folks because of this, that to me is totally separate. So if we're saying, we're just gonna look at this, we're gonna, try to see what we can do with the 10 acres and that's fine.
Yeah.
But if it goes beyond that, then I'm really
and,
uncomfortable.
and I think you're right in that relying on chip money is not cost neutral to the town, and that was one of our mandates.
That's
That, okay,
All right,
that's,
can you
Well-
repeat that? Not cost prohibitive or not what?
Not cost neutral to the town, he said.
How do you see it as not cost neutral?
because it's gonna cost us tax revenue to pay the thing back.
for up to 20 years.
Over a certain time horizon, we come out ahead. I think,
Yeah.
and I think, I think, that said, I think all of us, as taxpayers and citizens would want to I would think we'd want to put forward the most financially favorable proposal to the town while also being as affordable as possible and acknowledging that there's an inherent tension between those, but we want to come up with the best balance that we can.
I
Yeah.
agree. I think we also need to look at our horizons. Housing is not a 20-year thing. Housing is like a 50 to 200-year thing. And if we look at this as a no building on this land project, and then we look at all the other scenarios, 10 acres, 8 acres, chip, no chip. And we look at the total tax income to the town after 40 years. I think that's where we need to be looking.
Well,
Lauren's been trying for.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Lauren?
no, I was. Says Vicky, I guess what I'm thinking of is this is an incremental process and that what you have to look at is kind of like the assessment of potential risks. And to me, to have a group of, the number of architects, the number of people who have put in the number of hours of labor on this project and the amount of cash that we've spent in relation to that is so minimal that to me, the potential to develop this particular project and the amount we've put into it so far in terms of actual money, even with the $150,000 loan that I'm sure the BCF would forgive if the project does not come to pass. There's not much of an investment really, other than people hours that we put into this. We got a $35,000 grant, which we spent, but compared to the potential benefit of future tax revenue to the town, to me, it seems like, so we apply for the community development block grant and we've been told that we have to be as well prepared as possible for this. It has to be as shovel ready as possible. Pat Moulton is advising us of this. She's a state official who's very supportive of this project. And she has some influence, I believe. So, and also Doug Farnham, who grew up, he grew up in Plainfield. People are very aware of Plainfield situations. So I feel like it's a minimal risk to proceed at least apace with what we need to do to submit the community development block grant.
Oh, yeah, please don't misunderstand me. I don't have a problem submitting the DR grant. That's not, and I think the work that's been done for hardly any money for this town to be responsible for has been great and awesome.
Yeah,
I'm fine, I'm in line with you there. What I'm not comfortable with is saying that's set in stone, that there's gonna be a cost to the town with like chip. I'm not, I don't feel comfortable with that. We don't even know what the rules are for chip yet. They're not established yet. So I'm comfortable
Right.
in saying, you wanna look at 10 acres? Look at 10 acres for what you need to do for a design to get things moving, to submit the application for the DR grant, because we're gonna need that, same way you chip. But I'm just not comfortable with putting a burden on the town or saying. that
This is not a
that's-
final proposal, to be
Yeah.
clear.
Okay.
What I'm
Yeah.
proposing this committee is not an endorsement of,
Right.
you know, because at the end of the day, we have been tasked with submitting various proposals, which obviously will be written out, we'll review them all, we'll hash through all those details. But in terms of taking an incremental step forward, that we sort of need to have some parameters that allow us to be a little bit more concrete. I'm proposing that this committee take that at this time. It may very well be subject to revision later, but we sort of need to put some markers out there so that we can move forward, essentially.
So
Yeah.
and I'll look at Rick, or maybe I ought to wait till Rick's presentation part. The parameters are so that we can not spend $1 million on engineering.
Yes.
Okay. Is it not an option to tell the engineers that the absolute minimum we want, but here are our wish list, and what would that cost?
I think we can do some of those things and we'll have to get to that because there's also, you know, within this grant, no grant funding, I mean, we already know that there are some things that are gonna be cost drivers where, you know, if the power's overhead, it's marginally cheaper than underground. If we don't pave the roads, we're gonna save a little money there. There's probably other things that are like that. That I think we will be able to incorporate into that phase 2 engineering.
And that's more what I was thinking.
I think we'll have that, but I think what we need to do is move in the direction of a layout. So that, you know, we've sort of opened up this layout and said we probably need to make some revisions because of the overall finances of this. And in order to make some revisions, we need to redefine the parameters for those revisions. And my suggestion is to redefine that parameter as saying instead of 8.2 acres, we target 10 and see how that looks and try to move forward.
Yeah.
Does that mean that will be the
Absolutely.
final design?
No,
I don't think it will be. Yeah.
Arian,
Yeah.
are you okay then
Don's
as an
been trying
action
to-
item
I've been
after?
trying to speak here for quite some time.
What's that, who has?
Don's been.
No, I'm just trying to, I was gonna ask if there was consensus, but I'm not gonna ask that total discussion, so.
I was gonna just ask, is an action item, if we approve this, that our group does another sketch?
Yeah.
And
That's what
it
I'm
doesn't
thinking.
cost that much. It's not that, it's the three of us getting together and trying to.
And you guys are all free, right?
It's not strategic to point it out.
So I think, you know, for me right now, that's just really helpful.
Yeah, it is.
That's great. I think
I
think that
think
would be a great action item to come, you know, again, my bringing this forward is to say, I would hope for some consensus because again, the goal is to try to move forward to get, you know, towards a plan. And to do that, we got to put some chips on the board.
Yeah, I will say, it was the challenge of not really having any parameters and that task and having some parameters is really gonna help us develop something more meaningful and real. So I appreciate it. And I also appreciate your sentiment about the, you know, taxpayers, consideration of the taxpayer. I 100,000% support that, but I think we do need to move forward if we're gonna see where this lands, and I wanna see where this lands, so.
So-
I can.
So what kind of action item are you asking us to?
I think just sort of an acknowledgement that we have some consensus around this as a way of moving forward, not as the be all end all, but we gotta take some steps to learn some things and see how it goes.
So I'm hearing not a formal vote, but a sense of the meeting, a straw vote, more or less.
Yeah, well, with an action item also that it goes back to Rick and John and Liz to sort of to do some sketches along those lines.
Is there consensus for what Arian just said around the table for this and the action item?
Gives us a point to work on. I like it.
Great, okay.
Okay, then we've done it.
Okay, then we've noted that. Perfect. Great. And
Okay.
that's, I think that's all we have from our work group. And hopefully that helps Rick's work group move forward. And
Okay.
and I think he's next.
So now, yep, he is. You're
Okay,
on.
and I'm
Rick.
gonna try and be really brief. I have been puzzling over, I think, the steps in this process and how they interrelate. And I think of, I think sometimes that Arian might have the steps all together, but they aren't all together in my mind. And when I started to do a schedule here, which is just sort of blocking out what would happen, not a complex sort of work process kind of schedule, but something we could say, yeah, this seems like we've got all the if-thens down. What I did is I listed off sort of what needed to happen, like what committee decisions need to be made, that the site acquisition and all of its steps need to happen, the local and state permitting needs to go on, that the engineering needs to proceed at a pace that is not expending more money than we want to on something. That the grants and funding goes along and we understand what that schedule is, which has been one of the main things we're struggling with. What else? Oh, project financing. And then the lot sales. And so what I've been doing is trying to do that. And I guess what I'd like to do, and I'm just updating you, is continue to work on this and then present something that's very much a draft, because I hear a lot of, wait a minute, I'm not in favor of something that I see as 2 or 3 steps ahead of where we are now, or it's one thing, and we don't have the information yet to do that. So it'd be reassuring for me anyway, to comprehensively create a schedule and we all say, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's an order to when and what we would do, and we'd adjust it as needed. So if that's okay, I'm gonna keep working on it, and maybe in 2 weeks, I'll present it to the group, if that makes sense.
Your schedule needs to have our presentation of the select board to move forward on it as well.
Oh, yeah.
I agree with that.
Well, there's the local permitting, but there's also the there's the local permitting, but there's also local approval in my categories too. So I'm gonna try and get all those, John, and so actually, maybe we'll do that as part of our group.
We can.
Appreciate that, because that is something I've been hoping we get to this point, because it's been really hard to even nail down any type of timelines, because we don't know what we're working with, but even a broad, rough sketch of a timeline would be incredibly helpful for me, so I
Well,
appreciate
I
that.
had wanted to present it tonight, and then I just realized I showed it to Arian and he had 3 or 4 questions, which were just like, I can't answer those yet. I need more info. And so I just feel like I'm not there yet. It's
Yeah.
not soup, but
But I'm glad that it's like
okay,
coming soon.
Thank you.
that's all I've got.
Okay, before we adjourn, I'll just give the opportunity, anybody from the public want to make any comments? Seeing none, if we're done, I would entertain a motion for,
Chat. See,
Well, I think. Good call. One is Walker had to leave. So he's got to run, and happy to talk about that. There was other, Kirsty asked me to send the PDF that Sandy had sent to the presentation earlier, and I had forwarded it to her.
Okay.
okay,
So I think that's it.
do we have consensus for adjournment?
Yeah.
Let's go home.
All right, thank you.
The Haybarn, you hear the concert?
not at all.
Yeah, this would be a really good concert, the Haybarn.